The first reading is from Isiah, chapter 30, beginning at verse 19. People of Zion who live in Jerusalem, you will weep no more. How gracious he will be when you cry for help. As soon as he hears, he will answer you. Although the Lord gives you the bread of adversity and the water of affliction, your teachers will be hidden no more. With your own eyes, you will see them. Whether you turn to the right or to the left, your ears will hear a voice behind you saying, "This is the way, walk in it." The second reading is from Philippians chapter 4, beginning at verse 4. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. That activity was very fitting, and it's almost like we coordinated beforehand, that it matched up exactly with what I was going to say today, so it works. Yes, good morning. It has been a significant amount of time since I was last in front of any large number of people, and that time it was 16-year-olds. I was trying to teach them about thermodynamics. They had no desire to be there, so I'm hoping that this audience is a little bit kinder to me. But we'll see how we go. In any case, I am privileged to be able to talk to you today and 2 coming Sundays, and when I was trying to think about what I was going to say, what I was going to talk about, I came to 2 realizations. Number 1, I have no imagination. And Elizabeth will back me up on this. In our imaginative play, she doesn't really think I, bring the goods. I don't carry the weight. I'm not an ideas guy. She tends to tell me what to say, and then I just say it, right? So yeah, I'm not really the ideas guy. I'm kind of the guy that makes things happen. So I was struggling a little bit, as you might imagine, to think of what I was gonna preach on. Given that, I'm hoping the second realization was a bit more of a nudge from God, because, hey, I can't have ideas, right? And so what I kind of came up with, what I was thinking about when I was out on my run, was that actually something that I've struggled with, and perhaps you've struggled with, is that it's very, very easy to believe mistruths about the world, to believe lies. And it's very, very hard sometimes to choose the truth that God tells you over those lies. So that's what I'm going to talk about. A lot of the times, if we think back to that activity or that game, that 2 truths, 1 lie, it seems like life is a bit harder. It's more like 1 truth and millions of lies, or millions of half-truths. And admittedly, that 1 truth is the truth. It is the way, the truth, the life. It is Jesus, which is amazing. But it's still a substantially harder game than 2 truths, 1 lie. So what I'm going to be talking about then is 3 of the lies, or over the next few Sundays, the 3 of the lies that I have found are particularly easy to kind of get stuck in your head and to be hard to shake. First of which, God doesn't speak to me, or perhaps a more insidious version, why would he bother? So I'm going to show you a very quick clip that kind of summarizes what I was thinking when I was preparing this one, if you would. Thank you. Thank you, Luke. So that was from Emperor's New Groove. It's one of mine and Elizabeth's favorite movies. It's very, very funny. You should check it out if otherwise. But I was really struck by the way Kronk, in that particular scene, he's trying to decide whether or not he's going to rescue the Emperor, who's been turned into a llama, or if he's going to let him fall off a cliff. And he's got these 2 sort of competing voices, and neither of them seem to be very good for him. And he just says, "Be gone," or "However I get rid of you," and they disappear. And I was thinking, wouldn't it be great if all the voices that I hear all the time would just do that? I could just say, "Be gone," and they'd just disappear. But unfortunately, reality is much different, and it is much more difficult to dismiss those nagging doubts, those whispers, those untruths. So God doesn't speak to me, is the lie I'm looking at today. Now, I grew up in church, lots of different churches. I've lived in UK, America, and in that time we've been to Baptist churches, Methodist churches, Anglican churches. I don't even know what some of the American churches are. We went to a couple of mega churches once, and they've always got their own approaches, their own styles, their own formats. And when we've been to these places, I've always come across people who experience God in different ways. And, we all do. Some people get images in their minds. Some people hear words or get gentle promptings, thinking like, maybe this is the way you need to go. Some people may just sort of receive the Spirit in worship, put their hands up, speak in tongues, that sort of thing. And then I was thinking about when I read the Bible, how people experience God. And, it can get a bit more dramatic. You've got burning bushes, you've got voices from the heavens. Kate pointed out to me yesterday that at one point God made a donkey speak. And, there was that time when there was a literal giant hand writing on the wall for you. So contrary to that lie, God does speak. The question is, are you listening? So very occasionally, anecdote time, very occasionally, and I really do mean very, Elizabeth sleeps in. It's a wondrous thing. It's a wondrous thing. And it never happens, though, when we actually want her to. So there was this one time, not so long ago, I think maybe we were going away or something. In any case, she'd slept in, and me and Kate, we'd gone downstairs to get things ready to leave or something like that. And Elizabeth wakes up, and as she does, because we're usually still asleep, she goes into our bedroom and she's looking for us. She wants to wake us up so I can go and feed her or whatever it might be. And she gets there, and of course, we're not there. And so she's like, "Wait, what?" And as things progress, she starts shouting, and she gets a bit more confused and a bit more panicked. And she's like, "Mum, Dad, where are you?" And of course, the situation was easily rectified, right? We were just downstairs. And so when we heard her, we got over and we brought her down, and all was good. But that situation where you're looking for something and you don't find it, where something dependable might not be there where you want it or where you need it, was one that kind of struck a chord. And in Jeremiah 29, verse 12 to 13, it says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart." Ooh, I should not move around. At all. Wow, okay, yeah. But I read that, and I was thinking about that, and in our relationship with God, we don't have to have that fear. We don't have to have that worry that Elizabeth now has whenever she goes into our bedroom that we might not be there, right? Because God says, "You will seek me and you will find me." In that passage in Isaiah, he said, "You will call upon me and I will answer you." We don't have to fear that God won't be there. We don't have to fear that God won't be listening and that he won't answer, because he has built that relationship with us. Now, I myself have, I'm going to be honest, always kind of struggled with hearing God. Ooh, excuse me. Hearing God. Or even, I'll be honest, kind of sensing his presence. Growing up in the church, I always found it quite uncomfortable because in worship or just generally in like testimonies and stuff like that, people would be, raising their hands, they'd be receiving the Spirit, or they'd get these images and get these words. And that's never really been something that's kind of happened to me. And so especially growing up, I was like, should that be something that's happening to me? Oh, why am I not getting this sort of stuff as well? And yeah, it didn't feel good. And of course, then I'm thinking like, maybe God just doesn't want to speak to me, maybe he just doesn't. Maybe maybe I'm not worth it, or maybe he only speaks to particular people. Because we know that God speaks, right? I'm going to be saying it a lot in this preach, I apologize. But we know that God speaks up here, but we don't always know it in here. And that's where we've got to be careful. More often than not, I can only tell that God speaks or God is working even in my life in hindsight. So I'll give you an example. I got out of uni, and for the first 6 months or so, struggling to find a job, as many university students do, trapped in that sort of spiral of you need work experience to get your job, but you can't get any work experience if they don't give you a job, and round you go. Anyway, I got a job as a lab tech in a school, and within 3 weeks of having started that job, I had been approached to see if I'd ever consider teaching. I had been given the opportunity to lead a lesson and interview, so to speak. I had been given a new post as an unqualified teacher, and I had been enrolled on a teacher training course to start in September, 3 weeks after getting that first job. Like, I look at it now and I'm like, adoy. You know, clearly there was something at work there. Equally clearly, I know now that God wanted me to get out of teaching. I beat the curve, you know, I did about 7 years. There's a 5-year burnout, apparently. I did 7, so I beat the curve. But I know that God wanted me to get out of teaching, and he probably wanted me to get out of teaching maybe 1.5 years to 2 years before I actually did. But, you know, pandemic and, you know, not liking change and, you know, but what will I end up doing? I'll have to start again, and all these sorts of things. And you just kind of pretend you haven't heard, or just think maybe, oh, no, that's not from God, that's something else. I mean, why would he want that? Right up until the point that, you know, he gives you a very, very big push, which he did to me, and I'll be talking more about that another time. The point is that God does speak. He was speaking. I wasn't listening. Now, these days, the writing doesn't really appear literally on the wall anymore. I kind of wish it did, but unfortunately, or at least in my experience, no big hands have appeared, right? But just because it doesn't appear on the wall, it doesn't mean he doesn't speak. The first and most important way to hear from God is to be willing and to be open to him, to not buy into that lie, God doesn't speak to me. Because he has told us that he will speak. He has told us that when we seek him, we will find him, and that when we speak, he will listen, and that he will answer. Let's see if this works. Hey, there we go. Excellent. Now, for my part, I find that going for a run or a walk or something like that helps me to kind of hear from God in such a way as I have experienced it. I kind of go out and I focus on my footsteps and my breathing, and I kind of let everything else sort of drain away into the background. It's a little bit meditative, I suppose, but it kind of gets rid of some of that clamour that's going on in your brain, and it just helps you to be more receptive to him. And maybe because of that, that passage we read from Isaiah has always kind of spoken to me, that bit about turning to the right or to the left, and there being a voice behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it. And, you know, I get lost quite a lot when I run. It's quite nice, you know, you try a different trail, and you know what, that's great. But in life, it's nice to know that there's always going to be that voice behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it. God does speak. But in my experience, he tends to do it gently. He tends to do it gently. He doesn't tend to shout. And when I was talking to Elizabeth about this yesterday, she was really resonant with that. She was like, yeah, why would God shout at you? why would he yell at you? Right? He's God. He loves you. He shouldn't be shouting at you. God does speak, but he does it gently. He does it through a quiet word in your ear, a nudge to your spirit that guides you on the right path. Because ultimately, he wants you to follow him voluntarily. He doesn't want to be browbeating you into doing this, what, that, and the other. He wants you to choose to follow him. God does speak. Are you listening? 1 Kings chapter 19. The Lord said, go and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. but the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, there came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, there came a gentle whisper. It may be easier if we had big neon billboards or whatever. It may be easier if there was writing on the wall, but it's not necessarily going to happen. He still speaks, though. He speaks to us gently, and he tells us where we want to go. God does speak. Are you listening? So we know that God speaks. I mean, we sometimes get distracted by that. We know that God speaks up here. We get misled by that mistruth, by that lie that he doesn't, that he wouldn't, that why would he bother speaking to us? But he does speak. And when he speaks the truth, because he is the truth. And he brings peace. He brings peace as well. What God says brings peace. In the tumult that is everyday life and that is the voices that may be trying to push you one way or the other way, or saying, do this, or don't do this, or do that, or do the other, or, oh, you just need to go and get that. You know, God's message will bring with it no guilt. It doesn't bring with it nagging doubts or lingering questions. It doesn't seem sketchy like that telephone salesman that was trying to give you a deal that doesn't seem right, you know. God's word is truth. And when something is true, you may not like it. It may not be what you want to hear, but ultimately it is what you need and it will bring peace. Philippians verse 4, we read it earlier. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and thanksgiving, present your request to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your heart and minds in Christ Jesus. There was a game we used to play growing up called Chinese Whispers. Don't know if anyone knows Chinese Whispers. Yeah. Good game, fun game, yeah. You'd all go around and there'd be an initial phrase that kind of got decided upon or that someone came up with, and then you could whisper it into the next person down the chain and try and get it to the end, and people would have the same thing, right? But more often than not, it'd get changed somewhere down the way. You know, there'd be somebody say something stupid instead and think it'd be funny, or even if they try, you know, they just might not get it quite right, might not hear it quite right. And most of the time, you get something that is completely unintelligible, if it's English at all, you know. And often the lies that we receive, the voices that we hear, the sort of whisperings from the world, from ourselves, from the enemy, often those are subtle. They are distortions of the truth, words taken out of context or twisted from their original purpose. They don't necessarily come as, God won't speak to you. But that's not true with the Father. I am the way, the truth, and the life. The word from God is truth. He is the truth. And God does speak. Are you listening? Now, I was telling Elizabeth about this preach sort of yesterday, what I was going to say, that sort of thing. And I was saying that I asked her, does God speak to you? And she said, yeah, of course. I was like, okay, how does God speak to you? And she said, he gives me pictures, and you should ask her about her heaven thread image sometime. It's very good. It's very good. But then I said to her, but sometimes, you know, there are people like Daddy that don't necessarily hear from God that often, or don't necessarily think that God speaks to them much occasionally. And she kind of looked at me and she was just like, huh? What? He's God. Of course he talks to you. And part of me was like, oh, thank goodness. You've not been dragged down yet, you know? And it reminded me, you know, Jesus said, come like a child. And, you know, she didn't even question it. She knows God speaks. She doesn't question that. I mean, judging by some of the stuff she comes out with, he doesn't speak to her constantly, but, but he speaks, right? And she knows it. So why is it so hard to believe? Why is it so hard to believe? Now, I'm not a particularly good communicator. I mean, I can sort of do this stuff like this occasionally, and like teaching was all right, but that's because you kind of go in there and you know 100% that whatever happens, you know a lot more than they do. So, you know, so it's fine. It doesn't matter. But I'm not particularly good at like communicating just generally. I definitely am not a feelings sharer kind of guy. I tend to kind of keep that to myself. Somebody asks me, "Oh, what did you think of that movie?" I'll go, "It was all right." You know, I'm not an effusive person, right? I don't talk lots and lots and lots. Contrary to what's happening today, of course. But not all communication is necessarily about words. And so, as with my runs, you know, I don't need to speak when I go on my runs to know that I am spending time with God, to know that He is hearing me and knowing what I need. We are told that the Spirit intercedes on our behalf. I don't need to speak necessarily to spend time with Him. There's that whole companionable silence thing, you know, that you get to a certain point and you just know what the other person is thinking without them having to say anything. And wouldn't it be great if that's where we got to with God? I mean, He's got the advantage, right? He knows everything, but wouldn't it be great if we could say the same? When we seek God, we will find Him. When we speak, He will listen and He will answer. Don't let yourself believe that mistruth that God doesn't speak, because it's not true. Don't let yourself question whether He'll speak to you, because that's also not true. There isn't anything you could do that would stop God from speaking to you. You just have to engage and be willing. Don't let that lie, that mistruth, that twisting of words separate you from the love and the peace and the truth that is God. Because He is the way, the truth, and the life. Time out. Okay, cool. I'm going to stop there, actually. I'm going to leave it. I'm going to play a song. It's called The Voice of Truth by Casting Crowns. And I want you to just think on the words, and I want you to consider whether you're laboring under any mistruths. I've obviously got another two I'm going to be talking about later on. I get a lot of them. Maybe yours are different to mine. Maybe they're not. Maybe you've experienced this one as well. I don't know. But are you laboring under any mistruths at the moment? What might be stopping you from hearing God? Because we know He does speak. How can we grow closer to Him? How can we spend time listening to Him? And what might He be saying to you?